Hello,
Hi.
we're
It's
back.
it's Wednesday.
It's Wednesday again.
Still Wednesday.
All right.
I think I
I
clipped
think.
my hair in the microphone.
Oh, I hate it when I do that.
Oh,
I think.
maybe I'll put it down here a little farther.
uh,
Won't get my hair in
It
it.
looks like we have sound. I don't think I have us muted.
No, well, we're moving up
I
there,
see that.
and
Yep.
hopefully that's a good sign.
Yes. So.
So what?
So what? Right. We were definitely having a hard time coming up with
What to talk about
to
today?
talk about. I feel like we've talked about like everything over the last few years. Like there's no
I
stone
feel
left
like
unturned.
that we haven't missed too many topics.
No, but we still get asked a lot of generic things, which is I just want a standard needle or I just want the standard thread.
You know, the generic one.
The generic one.
I want the one that works for everything.
There's really no right answer to that.
No, there's not.
So we always try to ask more questions, and sometimes people get angry.
She's not wrong.
Super annoyed that we just can't give them.
We can't just say, well, here, this will work for everything.
Right. It's kind of like going to Baskin Robbins and saying, I just want, I
want the generic ice cream that will fill all of my taste buds.
Right. I want, just
South Dakota.
Yeah. So it's a hard question to answer.
It
and
is.
So we thought maybe if we talked a little bit about threads and needles today, that maybe it would help answer some of those questions.
Yeah.
And then you would know what.
I like the universal answer.
Right.
Is that it's good for lots, but perfect for nothing.
Yes. That's what I say a lot.
And I'm like, that's a really good answer because it's very accurate. It will work for a lot of things, but it is perfect for nothing.
Right.
It's generic. It really is.
Yes.
Which is why it's called what it's called. But there's certainly specific needles that will work better for everything.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just a matter of how specific do you want to be? Do you want the generic or do you want the specific?
Yes.
So we all know you want the specific.
I want the specific. Yes. I don't like to be generic.
No.
Mm-mm.
No, you're the high maintenance needle lady.
Totally high maintenance.
On just about everything.
Totally. Yeah, no, I'm not really that high maintenance, but I do have good taste.
Well, and there's nothing wrong with that.
Right.
Absolutely nothing wrong with that. And there's nothing wrong with saying I want the best. And when it comes to needles, there is definitely a better route.
Sometimes a much better choice.
That you're going to see a difference in your project. Mm-hmm. So, if you're getting skip stitches and yucky stitches, sometimes it's not your machine.
It isn't always your machine.
And you blame your machine.
Yeah, I
get that. People come in and they're like, my machine's messing up. And you're like, yeah, it's not your machine.
Yes.
It's what you put in it.
No. But I do think it's interesting. It's kind of like I attribute it to like your car. Like when my car does something stupid, I can't always assume that it's my car these days because there's so many different things going on in there that it could be that just like calling the mechanic and saying, you know what, my car is doing this. And, and then he says, did you put the right gas in? And,
which your mechanic is allowed to ask you that, but your husband is not. I mean, let's get real here, guys. Right. Your husband asks you questions like that, there's going to be some problems.
That's right. So sometimes it's not. Don't always jump. I guess the moral of this story is don't always jump to the worst case solution. It's not always a machine issue.
Not always a machine issue.
Sometimes there's some different things.
It is that simple. Of we could pop in a different needle and it will fix the problem.
It can definitely fix the problem. Yep. So all right, I think we have lots of people turning in now. So hi, Cindy, D. Carolyn,
hello,
Shannon, you weren't late.
Not late. It's all good.
Rambling.
We ramble at the beginning for a reason.
Yes.
To allow everybody that's a few minutes not quite ready when we start to not miss anything.
To not miss anything important.
And
we haven't had our aha moment yet.
The light bulb hasn't clicked on. There's somebody home, but they're not They're not with it yet.
Yeah, it takes a little bit.
Takes a warm up.
All right. So
You have a llama pencil.
I do have isn't it cute?
It's very cute.
Yeah. You never know what you might find on my desk.
You don't.
I've got a variety of things today. Threads.
We
bottles,
both
drinks.
have a variety of things.
Yep. My jar of inappropriate words.
Of inappropriate things.
Yes.
I need to add to that for you. That would be fun. One of these days.
All
Spare
right.
time.
So
Spare time.
needles and threads are what we are going to talk about today. And so definitely if you have questions about needles and thread, pop them up there.
Yep.
And we'll be happy to answer these for you. I have a fancy.
She's got some words.
I do have fancy words.
Aww. So what are all the numbers? What do they mean?
We're jumping ahead for some reason.
We're not going to talk about that first. So first thing, see, and this is the one I read, the first 3 words in my head went somewhere else. Let's talk about threads and needles. So
not salt and pepper.
Not salt and pepper, because we're not having that conversation. So how do you select that correct needle and size needle?
Yes.
So wow, that's really tiny print.
It is tiny. I'm sorry. I can't. If I make it bigger, I can.
Oh, that's actually better.
Yes.
I can read that.
We might have to switch back in case people ask us questions.
It's okay. We won't be able to see your questions for half a second because I couldn't see the screen any other way.
But yeah, so I always think this is an interesting question when I say to people that thread has a shelf life, and of course they look at me and they get, the first thing that happens is they get angry because it's like I'm picking on them. I'm really not picking on you, but I have been in a class where a person was using a spool of thread that was like
on styrofoam.
So it was really, really, really old, and they were using a really high quality machine, and every 6 stitches the machine and the thread they stopped, right, and everything, the thread just broke.
Danger, Will Robinson.
And we weren't getting anywhere, and we broke for lunch. And
did you buy her a spool of thread?
Someone in the class did, because they got tired of
the
us
class
waiting. Yeah. And so from that moment on, whenever I taught a beginning class on the basics of the machine, they got a spool of thread in their kit, because I was going to alleviate that issue, because it does happen. And the thing about it is you don't really know if it's going to be a problem until it's going to be a problem. And that's what I always tell people.
Late.
That's right.
It's too late.
I don't know there's no magic answer as to at
when is it going to happen.
It's not, it doesn't have an actual expiration date on it, but it has a theoretical expiration date on it, which is when it becomes brittle and it really doesn't support and hold together. It's definitely time to give it up.
Absolutely, because we don't want to work on that project and then have that project fall apart because we used old thread that broke.
Right, that was already brittle.
It was already there when we put it into the project.
Right.
It's just, why would you want to take all that time and effort to make something and then have it fall apart?
Yes.
That's no fun.
And that's the thing. I mean, if I have a spool of thread that is like 20 years old, and I start stitching my project, I want my project to last 20 or 30 years. Theoretically, do I think that 20-year-old spool of thread is going to
last another 20?
Right. It probably isn't. Now, if we're 20 years in the future and we were talking about the quality of threads from 20 years ago, I would say that thread would probably last you 40 years, because we've come so far in the manufacturing process, right? So every time I talk about this, I know that it's moving,
the
right?
life cycle is going to get longer, just like ours does.
It does, because everything changes.
Right.
So it's important to just kind of
think about it.
Right. And to start off, like, if you come into the store and you're having some trouble and we say, well, it could be your thread, please know that we're not picking on you. We are absolutely not picking on you. We are really just telling you.
You should see what we say to each other.
Right. From experience, we have found that sometimes this happens. So let's see. Shannon says, I do have a thread question. I received lots of threads from my mom. How do I know when the thread should be thrown out? I don't want to test it on my machine, she says. Well, you can do a couple of different things. Like I've been known to like grab the thread and sort of tie a little knot and tug on it. And if it breaks with very little tug when I tie that knot, then I probably should go ahead and, as I like to say, put that in the jar.
That's a jar that goes like in the upper right-hand corner of our screen here.
Yes.
That's a pretty decoration that you can, you don't have to throw it away. You
Right.
can make it a decor.
A decor. That's right. It's really nice. I have some old threads in my room that I know came from my grandma's grandma. They're old. They're brittle. Even the plastic on them is falling apart.
Right.
So, I know they haven't been kept well. I mean, geez, I didn't have air conditioning when I was a kid. And so, things weren't kept,
Right.
we're all kind of like in a nice environmentally controlled environment now. It's cooled and aired, and we have kind of a consistent temperature. Most people, not everybody. But
right.
That matters.
It does make a difference. Absolutely. What kind of spool is it on?
Right.
Because if it is on one of those old wooden ones or old styrofoam ones, it's probably not what you want to be using.
No. Because it probably isn't going to give you longevity. Will it probably hold your project for now? Possibly.
But it's couple washes and years down, it's probably not.
No.
So again, do you want to put all that time and effort in to have it fall apart?
Yeah, because the reality is we're talking a couple dollars, maybe a maximum amount of $10 in thread that you might need to purchase to make maybe a brand new project. That will last you a long time. And, like we always say with needles, the same thing, right? Changing that needle can make a big impact. So these little things can make a big impact on the quality and the
joy
of
your experience
and the lifespan of your particular project.
Yep.
So this little sheet here just talks about, again, moisture can cause your thread to swell, while very dry conditions can leave it dry and brittle. I always say, kind of like our skin, we get dry because it gets, we dehumidify and dry heat and all of those types of things. You theoretically should store your thread in a covered container so it's outside of UV lights.
Right.
It's not under all of those different things. If you have that stash of grandma's old thread, and you want to keep it for sentimental reasons, definitely keep it, but probably
find a cool jar or vase or something that you can put it up on a shelf that's not in the sunlight.
Yes.
That you can keep it and have fond memories of when you look at it.
Exactly. And then, good quality thread produced today is going to match, or is going to last much, much longer than the types of threads that we had, just a decade ago. So lots of us have, and Lisa and I are no exception to this. We have drawers full of thread.
Oh, absolutely.
We are never, ever in our lifetime, even if we started stitching now and we stitched 24 hours a day for the rest of your life, I probably would still have
thread left over.
Yes.
But that doesn't mean I ever have the right color.
So
let's get real.
So
we
true.
Never have the right color. So that's why we keep buying it.
Why we keep buying it. Yes. And
they come out with new pretty things.
They do. And just a little tip, if your thread is a darker color, dark colors, dark blues, browns, deep purples, black, most of
then dyed more.
Yes. Right. They don't traditionally make those deep colors intentionally. They a lot of times are threads that were misdyed, and so they basically just take them and they dump them in that deep color and they leave it in there, and so the dye can saturate into the thread. So that definitely will become more brittle. So you oftentimes will have a lot more trouble with the darker colors. I still to this day have said that I have never, no matter what brand of thread that I have found, I've never found a fantastic black thread that really just when you stitch it out, unless you do a triple stitch, it doesn't look good. They always just look junky. And I've bought really expensive thread and still thought to myself, man, this just does not
what I want.
Yeah, it just doesn't look as nice as I would like it to look. Let's see. So Sometimes I have thread that acts up when I get near the end of the spool. Is it my imagination or has this happened to others? Yeah, it definitely happens.
Yep.
So it's basically because it's coiled now. So
it's all got a lot tighter.
Yes, it's kind of like the old time perms, right?
So it's coming off the spool a lot tighter. It's not as relaxed. So it's got a different wind to it.
Yes.
And it's coming off in a different manner than it was. You also have the notch that will hold your thread to the spools tends to cause more issues. Your thread spool will jump more when there's less on there. So you'll know it has more of a vibration when there's the closer you get, the more it starts jumping around wherever it's at, which causes more problems as well. So there's multiple things that are going to start happening as you get to the end of the spool. So you are not alone.
No,
Miss Marilyn, by any stretch. You're not imagining it.
But you definitely have. So when you're on the outside, you've got loose curls, and then as you get down to there, the thread has been wound so tight for so long that when it spools off
and it's going through the machine, you get
twisty.
Sometimes too much thread in one spot.
Yep.
So it will get caught somewhere that it wasn't getting caught before.
Yep. A lot of times when I get down, I would say if it's a thread that I'm sewing with, like my actual sewing thread, when I get a little bit past the halfway mark, that's about the time that I basically just wind bobbins with the back half of it, because I that completely I find obnoxious. In the process of taking it from my regular spool and putting it on my bobbin thread pulls it tight enough that I don't typically have that problem. And that
in the process of coming up from your bobbin is very different than being threaded through all of your top tension and take up lever. And I mean, it's a very different path that it's being taken to as well. So, yeah, absolutely. That's a great thing. If you guys didn't catch that, versus using that end of the spool, run a bobbin with that, it's the thread that you're using all the time. So you use Presencia as your sewing thread almost exclusively. You've got probably a very large white spool that you're talking about, or a very large black spool, or navy, or whatever. So you run bobbins with that ending of that spool.
As soon as I see it sort of
starting to come off tighter, you're like, okay, that's bobbin thread.
And it's time to wind some bobbins.
So
I get cranky when I run out of bobbins.
Well, and it's a great idea in a way to use that thread up in a more efficient manner so that you have less issues while you're sewing.
Yeah, because it's not going through all the tension pieces when you're and so that is a good
it's a great way to use that thread in a less cranky manner for your machine.
Yeah. And really, if you're in a pinch and you really need to use that, just the process of taking it off of the spool
will stretch it because it's going through that tension.
Putting it on your bobbin, then you could put your bobbin on your machine, and then you could use that thread if you needed. So
if you were dying,
yeah. If
like, oh, I needed just a little bit more.
Yeah, I need to get through 6 more rows, and then I don't have any more of this thread, and it won't be a problem. That works because it kind of untwists it and makes it slightly different. So
and with it going through the bobbin tension, it's kind of making
stretching it or something, but it definitely works.
Untwisting
and or changing the twist or something.
Absolutely.
So Karen says,
why did we get to skip work today?
I know. Well, we're glad you joined in.
Yes,
so,
absolutely.
Definitely don't feel bad when you toss out a cranky spool before it is empty, because honestly, sometimes it's just more
stress
hassle
than it's worth. Absolutely.
Yep.
So you bet. I have like a major glare on my glasses.
There is. There. Yeah, we're in a weird
right at that
angle.
Spot.
So yeah, it definitely has a shelf life, and the shelf life isn't an indeterminate number. It's variable based on how it's been stored and handled and created and all of those different things. But definitely do the little tie knot and see if it breaks.
Give it a little tug and see what it does for you.
Yeah, because that will definitely make a little bit of a difference for us. So, all right. So when you're looking at your threads, a lot of times they have a ton of different numbers on them. And sometimes that can be super confusing.
Oh, come on.
In the old school, we basically had 2-ply thread and we had 3-ply thread. And everything kind of fell into those two categories. And 2-ply thread was always the threads that you use for decorative purposes, and 3-ply threads were always the construction purpose threads. That is not the case anymore.
No.
In my mind, it is still the case, and it is still how I choose my threads. But not everybody lives by my mantra,
your rules?
my rule. Yes.
They don't speak Sarah.
They listen to me sometimes, but I don't think they believe it. But I always reference the ply of their thread based on like a braid in your hair. If we braided our hair with 2 strands and we just twisted it, as soon as we let go of that, it would completely
fall out,
undone. And if we braid our hair with 3 strands, when we braid it, the braid stays. It doesn't completely untwist, which is why, in my opinion, 3-ply thread for construction is better.
That makes sense, right?
Because when you relax it, it stays plied. It stays braided. When you have 2-ply, when you relax it, it's just going to release. So I don't, and then you just have 2 strands, which in 2 individual strands to me cannot be as strong as 3 braided. So that is why I pick the threads that I pick oftentimes. So now you know.
I might have heard that before, maybe.
Yes.
But maybe they didn't.
They might not have known that. So the dirty little secret is almost nobody tells you the ply of their thread anymore, because they don't really want you to know that it's mostly all 2-ply.
Probably just a 2-ply.
Yeah. A lot of times, the only time you will actually see the ply on there is when they are a 3-ply, because they're super proud of it. Yeah. So they will actually talk about that, where everybody else just kind of keeps it as a secret. So that is one of those really funny things. So different sizes of threads come in different ranges. And unlike our needles, this is backwards.
Yeah, because we couldn't make it all the same direction.
No.
God forbid.
No. And the other question that we get is, I just want regular sewing thread.
Yep. What does that mean?
So, I mean,
regular,
something completely different to me than it does to you, because we're mostly sewing different
types of things in general.
Right.
You know, it's so I'm sure people will go, God, why do they always ask me so many questions when I go in there? But we do. We always ask a lot of you ask us a question and we ask you one right back. It's like, who's going to ask the last question? It's a game we play,
it's a game we play, yes.
But, you ask us, I just like some regular sewing thread. Okay, great. What kind of project are you sewing? And you're like, I don't know.
Right.
I just want to buy some thread. Well, I can't answer your question until you answer my question. So, what, do you want a poly or do you want a cotton? Well, I don't know. That's why I said I just want a regular. Yep. Well, I don't know either until you tell me what you're going to do.
So we're not really being combative. We're really not.
We might sound like we are, but we're really trying to be helpful to make sure that you go home with the kind of thread that you actually want to be using.
Yes.
So
and that will work for your particular
project. That's going to work for your project and make your project last as long and equivalency long as possible. So what do I mean by equivalency? If you have cotton fabrics, what kind of thread should you be sewing with?
Most people are wishy-washy about this. I definitely use cotton thread with my cotton fabrics when I'm sewing them together. Construction purposes.
Purposes. If we're just talking decorative, it's a free-for-all. You can have pretty much whatever you want because it doesn't matter what when it's going to fall apart.
Yeah.
But in construction, you don't want to have your thread actually shredding your fabric in the washing machine.
No.
Because it's stronger than your fabric.
And that's the real truth.
That is really where that comes down to it.
Yeah, polyester thread is so much stronger than cotton thread that it is
over the years in that washing machine when it's doing its thing, that thread is going to be pulling on those fibers.
Exactly.
And not making it look as pretty.
Right. And so I bet you that No.
Sorry. But seriously, so these are the reasons that we ask so many questions, is we do really want you to have the best experience, and we want your stuff to last as long as possible, because we don't want ours, to fall apart or not, or get pulled apart by things any more than we want yours to. So, we do try to explain why we're asking those questions, so that you don't come out of here going, man, those ladies are harsh.
Right.
Has so many questions.
It's like an interrogation for my thread.
Just needed one spool. But seriously, that is where it's coming down.
That's where it's coming from. I learned some really interesting information when I went. So I did this little stick in a sewing club. I talked about threads and needles and different things, and I learned a little bit of information that was even new for me about the industry and how the strands are put together, and what does the weight and the numbers actually mean. What I learned was that the industry is not regulated.
Nope.
So
not even a little bit.
It isn't even a little bit. So like, and then I went home and I started looking at my threads, and I was like, well, gee, I'll be darned. They're completely different. So like, theoretically, 12 weight, 30 weight, 40 weight, 50 weight, 60 weight threads. 12 weight being the thickest, 60 weight being the finest. If you have 4 different brands of thread and they are all 12 weight or they are all 60 weight, they should,
in theory, they should be pretty dang close, right?
They should be pretty dang close, but they are not. No. Everybody's fabric or everybody's threads and their equation to get this mathematical number is completely different. And so that can change drastically from brand to brand. So it really can be a little bit annoying. Like if you always use a 60 weight thread and all of a sudden you pick up somebody else's 60 weight thread and you're like, geez Louise, this is taking up so much space in my seam allowance. Is this really what is supposed to happen? And that really is the truth. It's not regulated, so it could definitely be completely different. Marilyn is asking, does the hole in the needle need to be larger on a 3-ply thread?
It's a great question.
It is a great question. The answer is kind of yes and no. It really depends on how the thread was manufactured, because theoretically, if your threads are 60 weight, the 60 weight has to do with the total size,
right?
With all of your strands. So it doesn't really matter if it's a 2-ply or a 3-ply. It should take up the same amount of space in the hole of your needle, but it's not always the case. I typically piece with a 60 weight sewing thread that is 3-ply, and I will typically piece with a 75 or an 80 needle. Those are the 2 sizes that I use most frequently. When I stitch with anything larger than a size 60 weight thread, I am either in an 80 or a 90, because I have found that for me and the threads that I use, there seems to be less change in the thinner thread. Like they're more all pretty thin, but the thicker threads, there is a huge difference in them. And so a lot of times I just have to play around with it. Most people will find a thread and you will kind of stick with it. And right. I do find that manufacturers, I do find that they're consistent with their own
threads. Like, right.
Yeah, it's kind of like they have their own recipe and they continue to make the threads the same way. So once you find the correct needle to thread ratio for the particular style that you're using, I don't think that you will have to play around a lot. It's just if you're going to do decorative stitching or you're going to be changing.
Where you're, when you get into the heavier, meaning the lower numbers.
Yes.
That's where you're going to have to really start going, okay, I need a larger eye.
Right.
And that might equal more of a top stitch versus a larger number.
Right.
because you don't want to be puncturing larger holes, equaling a larger number.
Exactly.
You still want that smaller number, but you just need a larger eye for the thread to go through.
For the thread to go through. Yep. So. And different, and we'll talk more about needles in a minute, but different needles, sometimes it can be the same size, but because of the style of the needle, the hole is actually bigger. So sometimes you've got that to consider as well.
So sometimes you can cheat.
You can cheat. Yeah, you can. And that's sometimes important to know if you have a needle threader on your machine.
Right.
Because
absolutely, because that makes a
big difference.
Really big difference in whether your threader is going to work with whatever it is that you're putting in the machine. So got a couple things that are popping up.
Yep.
Marilyn would like to know what brand of thread that you use to piece. It's what I use to piece now as well.
Yeah. So I use a brand called Presencia. It is a long stapled cotton that is 3-ply, which means they use long strands when they actually make it, and which gives it a smoother feel. So sometimes cotton thread can be really linty. This is not, I mean, anytime you use a cotton thread, you are going to get some lint. There's no way around that. But I did use Aurifil thread for a long time. In comparing the amount of lint that I had with Aurifil thread versus the Presencia, I would say I have half as much lint. Yep. And then I also used Mettler thread for a long time. And I have some older spools of Mettler cotton thread that actually are 3-ply. I do not know at what point they changed, but I was completely flabbergasted because they never said anything. And we just noticed that, like, they had sent us new signs one time. And the new sign, the only thing that was different about the sign was that it no longer carried the ply information on there. So I was like, you sneaky little suckers.
What are we gonna do about that?
Yeah, so that definitely was weird and kind of sneaky, but Aurifil sort of blew up in the industry because that guy who sells the Aurifil thread, he's Italian, he's so cute. And I swear that at the first market that he was there, everybody bought it because
the guy was really cute.
He was really cute, and he just kept saying, buy my thread, and we were all like, okay.
Yeah, totally. Will you come show me it to the store? Bring it to me.
Yeah.
Right.
But Aurifil thread was originally designed, and it's still called embroidery thread. Their original 2-ply thread was designed to be done
decorative.
It was done for like a matte finished embroidery thread. That's what it was designed for in your sewing machine, to basically just create
decorative stitches.
Yes, it was never designed as a construction thread. They now have tons of thread. Aurifil has come so far away. They have 2-ply, they have 3-ply, they have thick threads, they have thin threads. So people sometimes ask if we carry Aurifil, and we don't carry Aurifil. And the other thing that they always say is, the one that I use for piecing, and I'm like, oh, good grief. There are now 72 different types of Aurifil thread. I don't even know where to start this conversation. But yeah, everybody started using it because it took up so much less space in their bobbin that everything just ran for longer. And that was sort of where that blew up. But it was kind of at that point when I was making some bags and realized that my seams were popping really easy. And then I started going down like the rabbit hole of
what's going
thread,
on here, and
I was
figure
like,
it out.
Seriously, can I not find a good quality thread anywhere? And then I sort of stumbled upon Presencia, and I have been using it ever since. So there is the long story that you probably didn't need to know, but that is the truth.
Hey, Carolyn, are they good?
So sewing thread is definitely different than like your machine embroidery thread. And we sell a ton of machine embroidery thread. We separated it at the store. If you've been into the store recently, we moved the sewing thread like completely away from the embroidery thread because we have so much embroidery thread. We have so many great choices of embroidery thread.
It's almost overwhelming, to be frank. We have 4 different brands.
Yes.
Yeah. So there's tons of options, and it doesn't always have to be embroidery. You know, it
Yeah.
can just be a decorative sewing threads. It can, but it's so pretty.
Mhm.
And there's so many colors.
Yes.
And then when you have 4 different brands of so many different colors,
So
it's
yes.
just a
How
rainbow.
can there be this
It's
many
a
shades?
rainbow of fruit
It's a
flavors.
rainbow
So,
of fruit
but
flavors.
yes.
Yes.
So, but yeah. So long story short, Presentia 3-ply 60 weight
Yeah, that is my go-to thread.
is the go-to for piecing, and it takes up less room in the seam.
Yes.
And
it's strong.
And it's strong. So
and it goes a long way in my bobbin.
Long way in the bobbin. So that's the main
Mhm.
tickets there, and it's cotton.
It's cotton. Yes.
So and it's cotton, and you sew mostly on quilting cottons.
Yes.
So all of
Yes.
those things together equal your favorite.
Yes. Yeah. The really only exception to that is when I make bags. I do sew with a polyester thread, mainly because you
But you're also putting in battings and
yeah,
foams,
you've got
and
you're kind of like mixed media.
your mixed media in there. You've got lots of different things that you're putting in there.
Yes.
So it's not just cottons that you're building.
No.
And the poly is a stronger, so you're getting stronger seams for your corners.
It
and
is.
things.
And it
So
is likely at some point that the seam will rip through the cotton fabric.
The fabrics.
I mean, we've all probably had a purse or a wallet or bag where that basically happened.
Which is why you see the leathers or faux leathers or
Yep.
whatever on the corners, is because those are the stress points and
Yep.
things like that. So, but the poly is a stronger thread.
Yes.
So that's why you would use the different types on that type of a project.
Absolutely. Yes.
So
yes.
again, why we ask you, what are you doing when
Yes.
you're buying, and asking what thread do I need?
Yes.
So,
and or if you're putting something in the microwave.
yeah, maybe
we've had a lot of people making like
those bowl
bow
cozies
and things. Yeah. And if you didn't know this, it should be 100% cotton fabric, batting, and thread.
The whole shebang.
Otherwise,
all cotton.
It can definitely melt in the microwave.
It can, and you don't want there's some battings that can actually like make popcorn.
Yeah.
That's always a fun one.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Sometimes we go off.
Don't get that with stuff either.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
Shannon, what do we got?
I had an issue let's put it here. I had an issue a couple of times when I have a thread, might have had
She's
while.
had it for a little while.
Yeah,
okay.
and I get a new one and it runs out and it doesn't seem like it's the same shade.
So unfortunately that happens sometimes.
Yeah.
And that's, the dye lot things are usually they do pretty good most of the time, but it does occasionally. I don't see that as much in thread as I do like in yarn.
Yeah,
yarn, I see it all the time. You have to be really careful with yarn and look for your dye lot to be the same when you're buying to do a project, or your sleeve might be a completely different color than, something, whatever other parts.
Yeah.
But it can be.
I would
part
say
of that would be, I think, like sunlights or
whether or not your particular thread has
been in the sun or
UV lights or something like that, or if it's like a rayon versus a polyester. So the different types of embroidery type threads, they will take sunlight and UV lights and fluorescent lights. They will affect that differently. But also, I would say that the manufacturing process from brand to brand changes. And Floriani, Exquisite, Brother, Metler, Isocord, Glide threads, they have a manufacturing process where it is a recipe. And I think that you would be hardcore to find
a variance
in the shades of those threads, because they use the same types of material consistently, and they consistently dye pretty regularly, like the same type of thing. They have it's kind of like, when you go to McDonald's and the fries always taste the same. So they have,
they certainly should.
They should, right? They have a method and a way that you do that. But I have definitely had some smaller brands and or different brands of companies, the dye lots changing a little bit on them. So I think part of that might depend on the type of thread and the type of brand that you have. That can change. And Carolyn is asking, what are your thoughts on Wonderfill thread? I have read a lot of positive things about them.
They have some really fun stuff.
They do. I have a love-hate relationship with it. Like, I found some of their threads to be fantastic, and then I have found some of them to be just a hot mess. I'm not a fan of their metallic threads. I have tried to stitch and embroider with them, and they are really, really
I would rather sew with their metallics than embroider with their metallics.
Yeah, they don't embroider real well. And I have some of their sewing threads. They have some really pretty colors. We sell some of the stuff here.
I would rather serge with their threads than do anything else.
Yes, yeah, and their threads are really fun in the serger. I think that a lot of times it really just, they have so many different options.
Yeah, they really do.
That
they've got a lot of blending, they've got a lot of glamour, they've got a lot of you know, multicolored, so like a variegated and those kinds of things. They've got a lot of really fun things, which means we all really want their stuff because they do have a lot of really fun stuff. You know, sparklies, you know, glitter threads and variegated threads and really, really pretty stuff.
Yes.
That is hard to not buy. So
absolutely.
Absolutely some really pretty stuff. And
they're a newer company.
And you know, and honestly, if you're taking, you know, the time to stitch them how they suggest it and those, you know, taking all of those steps, again, embroidery is a different, a whole different ball of wax.
It is.
But you know, if you're sewing or serging and you are following the suggested guidelines and things, I don't know that, you know, you need the right needle for sure.
Yep.
So, which we are going to need to talk about needles because we're running out of time.
Carolyn says that she is mainly a garment sewer. I think that they have some decent threads.
My mouth.
Got a hole there.
I have a hole.
You kind of just have to I would use it. I guess I would definitely use their thread, and I have a drawer full of different varieties of Wonderfill thread.
Oh, yes, and I have quite a bit. And,
but
I'm not a thread huge collector of different threads, and I have quite a bit of Wonderfill threads.
But I definitely think one of the things that you have to do is you have to find the right combination of that thread with a needle
and the right fabric.
Yes, that gives you a good duplicatable type stitch.
Yep.
And does the life of a needle change with the type of thread you use, such as metallic thread? No. We'll talk about needles in just a second. And is Presencia thread is more expensive than other cotton threads? I don't know. I think it's actually pretty comparable. And it is part of the Bag Lady sale.
Yep.
So we talked a little bit about this already. What weight should I get? Whoa, no, stay. I'm not leaving. Oh goodness, I hit the wrong button. There we go. So the twist in the stack of the thread, we kind of touched base on this a little bit when we were talking about how the thread was sort of spiraling out. There are really only two different ways that you can wind thread on a spool. It can be cross wound or it can be stacked. Thread manufacturers will say all kinds of crazy things. They will call it an S twist and a Z twist, and they will say that it's a left hand and a right hand twist. And all of that is just completely fabricated. It's just a way of saying the same thing. The thread is either cross wound or it is stacked. And there are only two ways of doing that. So, you know, if your thread is looping and turn it around the other way. That's the first thing that you can do. If you've got it, the thread is coming off over the top and it's not working, turn it so that it comes over from the bottom and vice versa. They do make thread stands that can change the way your thread comes off of your spool. So sometimes having it come up and then over is better than having it just spiral over, which is very helpful if you have a persnickety type thread. We already talked about the threads that we use. And now let's talk about needles. So this is a perfect example of two different needles that are exactly the same size.
Yep.
The one on the top is the universal, and the one on the bottom is a top stitch needle. You can see now, obviously this is a magnified version. Sometimes I wish it was this big,
no
right?
doubt,
It would be
right?
so much easier to thread it. We could thread it with a dart from across the room. But the eye of the needle is substantially bigger in a top stitch needle, because they assume that when you're doing top stitch, you're going to probably be using something that is a little bit thicker. Absolutely. Just exactly what needle thread. You're bigger the thread, which is the smaller number of the thread, you need a larger number of needle. So they are exactly the opposite. This is very tiny. It's probably not as tiny for them, but let's talk a little bit about the different types of needles. So there are two sizes on a needle. There's like on a standard 80-12 needle.
12.
You've got an 80, and then you have a 12. Do you have a preference to what do you reference?
I always say them both, because people just don't understand that, you know, I'm an American, I should say one or the other, or I'm European and I should say one or the other. So I just, it's an 80-12
It's
or
an
it's a 75. I
11.
just say the whole thing.
Yep.
I mean, I know which one is which, but
right.
I think the common Joe just says the whole thing.
The whole thing. Yeah.
So I just generally say the whole thing. What do you do?
I usually do the same thing as well. In my mind, I'm referencing the larger number at the top, though, and I do that because I find that it's an easier way for me to keep track of an 80, and then because of the difference in the threads.
Okay.
So an 80-12, in my mind, if I say a 12, I think it would work with a 12 thread,
Gotcha.
the 12 weighted thread, and I know that's not correct. So in my mind, I always say 80-12, but in my head, I'm thinking of a size 80 or a size 90. I think of the first number in there, just because it helps me keep track of
so
the
moral
sizes.
of this story is whatever works for your
That's
head.
right. Yeah, however you need to. If you were to come to us with either one of those numbers, we would be able to figure it out.
We will absolutely be able to help you. So case in point, it is the European and the US sizes is what those are. So they are the same thing. It's just the different countries' descriptions of the same needle.
Absolutely.
That's all that is.
Just absolutely. Yep.
That's it.
That is it. It's just two numbers, and they're far enough away from each other.
Technically mean the same thing.
They do. Yes.
So
just like everything feels like it has two versions
of
the
same thing. But this is a great little chart to help you see the different types. So when we say that universal is great for lots but perfect for nothing, it's because it's not the exact thing that you see there for any of those. It's kind of a little bit of this and a little bit of that and all of those things. But if you needed a super sharp point based on the type of fabrics that you're using, you would want the sharps, which is also called microtex, depending upon what brand that you're buying. Jerseys are also called ballpoints. Jeans and denim, that one's a pretty easy. So there's, different names depending upon the company that you're buying. And so this is a really nice visual that you can see the different types of tips, because those tips are really, most of the time, that's the real big difference. The scarf is sometimes different.
Yep.
The eye is definitely going to have some variance.
Yep.
But the tip is always going to be
the tip is always going to be different. Yep. So the little cheat sheet on the side talks about butt size, shank, shoulder blade, groove, eye, tip, and point. And like Lisa said, the back part, which groove, we oftentimes refer to as the scarf of the needle. It's the indentation. It's the part that that it does change a lot from different needle to needle, the back part of that. So the other thing that we get asked a lot is, how do I know when my needle is dull? What do you tell them?
Well, when's the last time you changed it?
Yes.
If the answer is I don't remember, it's time. That's the number one. And a lot of times you can hear it.
Yes.
So if you are actually hearing your needle going through your fabric, it's way past time. So those are the two things that I usually ask and mention.
Yep. Yeah. If you can hear your machine stitching, the thunk 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 of that,
or the pop pop
or
pop,
the pop, yeah,
it's time.
it's definitely you've gone past the life expectancy of that.
Because that is needle. That is what you're hearing, is your needle forcing its way through the fabric.
That
and
can also happen with the wrong style.
That
tip.
is true.
Yes.
But the oh, I still have the same one that came with my machine. That's my favorite answer to that question of when's the last time you changed your needle. So if you're in that group, we're not calling anybody out, but if you are, when we finish here today, go change your needle.
That's right. That's right.
Please.
So yeah, I mean,
so what do you tell people is like, and I know that there's no exact answer to this,
right,
but what do you say is like a stitch time hours wise, or and I know that you don't follow this, you just put a new one in every time you sit down, but
yeah, I think that you should change your needle based on you changing your project by the bare minimum. And sometimes an embroidery project could mean multiple needles depending on the quantity of stitching that I have done in there.
You know, one of the projects like this has, you know, 7 days worth of stitching.
Yeah.
That's more than one needle.
Yes.
You know, you got to think about that one guy. You know, that's not a project. That's, you know, sometimes a hooping. Oops, I just wrote all over myself. But, you know, you have to think about those things too. But
yeah. So the life of your needle doesn't change with the type of thread. It changes with the type of material, the type of stabilizer, the things that it's basically poking through. You kind of think of like a knife, right?
Yep.
Your knife is sharp until it isn't. You know, the one slice of tomato was fine. The second one, it's a hot mess. So now it will no longer. Your needles are basically the same way. They're sharp until they are not sharp. And the goal is you don't want your needle to become a problem. You don't want skip stitches. You don't want holes in your fabric.
And ideally, you don't want your needle to break.
Right.
You want to change it before it becomes too weak.
Yes.
And actually breaks, and it becomes shattered into the machine where you can't find all the parts. You know, that's the goal, is that's not happening.
Yes.
We want to have that being changed prior to it becoming an issue. And shredding your thread and all of those things.
Yes.
So if you start getting, you know, that big nest of shredding where it like balls up and it starts to get this little loops on each side of the needle, and it's going up there, that is most likely your needle is time it needs to be changed.
Yes.
That's probably what's causing that. And people will call and say, you know, I'm getting shredded thread. First thing we're going to ask you, when's the last time you changed your needle?
Yep.
That's when we get that. Oh,
I'm supposed to do that.
We're supposed to do that. But seriously, that is the most common thing is shredding thread.
Or skip stitches. That would be the second thing. Yes.
So, you know, if you call us and you ask, you know, I'm having this problem, we're going to ask you another question.
Yeah.
When's the last time you changed your needle? Because those are the very common things that we see with a bad needle.
Yep.
And if you say, well, I just put a new one in, we might say, we'll do it again.
Yeah. Or double check to make sure you put it all the way up.
Put it all the way in.
That is a really,
unfortunately, it's not that hard for it to slip down a little bit.
No.
While you're tightening that screw, if you let go a little bit, you tightened it just a little bit below where it's supposed to be.
I mean, it can even slip down when you're stitching.
Which if you didn't tighten the screw enough.
Yeah.
The vibrations of the machine can bump it out.
Yeah, because there's a fine line between tightening your needle screw too much
over tightened
and not enough. So I definitely try to check my needle screw more often. My needle screw and my foot screw on my machine, I check them more often than I used to, because I try not to over tighten everything, but you know, everything just sort of wobbles as you're stitching. So you get that little weird vibration. It happens a lot when we're in class. Because you know, you got the two machines on the tables, and they create that extra weird vibration.
You get the extra wobble.
Yep. So Marilyn is asking, will stitching through sticky stabilizers, heavyweight stabilizers, or through cork, vinyl, or leather dull your needles faster? Yes, it definitely can dull them quicker. I definitely think that that is a pretty common occurrence. And especially I would say have the stabilizers, anything
like
that's papery,
that heavy tearaway
that we love.
We love that stuff, but yes, you will definitely, it's like super, super heavy cardstock paper kind of thing. When someone takes your sewing scissors and cuts through paper and you yell at them, it's the same kind of thing.
Yeah.
That's kind of what's happening with that.
Yep. So Carolyn says she has trouble keeping the ballpoint and the stretch needle separate. One is to be used when you have lycra in the fabric, and the other is with, yes, you are correct. Ballpoint, this is how I remember it. Ballpoint is kind of like a baseball, so it's a jersey, like that you might, like a t-shirt. So that's the type of material t-shirts and sweatshirts you use that for. And the stretch ones are for your bathing suit, because I hope it will stretch around my butt. That's usually in my mind how I remember those. So there you go. So I want my stretch bathing suit to be super stretchy, and so it needs to be like the stretch needle, and the ballpoint is like a baseball. That's how I remember it. So ballpoints are jerseys, and they go with t-shirts and sweatshirts, and your lycra lycra goes with the stretch ones, which are usually called stretch.
Yeah.
Yes. So that is like swimsuit, like elastic underwear, all of that type of stuff, lingerie type materials, and t-shirts and sweatshirts for the ballpoint. So yeah, come up with some weird version of that. Now you'll always remember me saying that, and you shouldn't have any more problems.
That was her, by the way. Sarah. No, just kidding. So, I mean, there's all different types of ways to dispose of them. I have a water bottle that I finished that I keep, and that's where all of mine go. Working its way up. I got a lot of room in there.
Yeah.
So a container that is going to keep it safe, not just chucking it into the trash that's going to hurt somebody else down the line.
Yep.
Here at the shop, we've had like mint containers that, but a plastic container that seals, that you don't have to worry about throwing them in the trash. Is just, it's just asking for someone else to get stabbed when they take out the trash or something else. So, that's what, I don't know. What do you do?
I have like an I think it's like an Advil bottle or something, just a
small,
same kind of thing. Yep. Yeah.
Yep.
Before that, I had something that it had I don't remember what it was. It was like a flip top something, and there was already a little hole in it.
That works
so I just use that. But yeah, basically just a small little container.
Something that's got a lid that you can make sure stays closed and nothing's going to spill out of it.
And an easy enough lid that you don't struggle to get it open, because the last thing you want to do is go
drop the needle and and throw everything everywhere.
Yes.
So.
What needle do you use for minky? Honestly, I use a universal needle for minky. I think that, and that might be the recommended from Schmetz.
Yeah, I generally am embroidering when I use minky, whether it's on the back of something or using it as an applique piece or something like that, which means I'm using an embroidery needle, which is an embroidery's version of universal.
Yeah,
so
it's a slightly blunted tip.
Same basic thing. So, yeah, me too.
Yep. Let's see. Oh, I'm so sorry. That's me.
So, needles shouldn't make you stressed. They also shouldn't make you afraid to change your needle. When you think about how much these actually cost, they're usually $1, roughly. Maybe a little over, maybe a little under. But when you really think about how much money we put into the projects that we are doing, it's negligible. I mean, literally, that's nothing.
No.
So it's not worth the shredding of your thread, the shredding of fabrics, the breakage and, it flying up and scratching your face, God forbid, change your needles. It's really, it's just not worth those stress points, and we have this conversation with all of you when you come in, and what needle do I need, and I really have to change it. How often you want me to do that? We have those conversations a lot, and it's not hard. So when in doubt, just change it.
Yep.
It's a buck. Just you're spending lots of money on fabric and thread, and it's just not worth it.
Yep.
So just change the needle. You'll be a lot happier, and your project and everything will go much, much smoother.
Yep.
So this is a nice little tells you what things are when you can't read.
I am not a needle saver, so let's just start with that. When I'm finished with my project, the needle goes, it gets thrown away. And it honestly, if I use that needle for an hour and I completely finished a different project, I'm still throwing it away. If I'm working on something else that is going to use a completely different type of needle, I'm not saving it because it's just one more thing. But if you are a saver, and I'm not saying you shouldn't be a saver, I'm just saying that if you are a saver, the problem is sometimes what the heck needle was that?
Right.
Schmetz is the only brand that has two-toned colors on theirs, and they have a color, one stripe for the needle size, and they have one stripe for the needle type. So if you are trying to figure out the type and the size needle that you have,
it actually is fairly simple.
It is fairly simple, and you can get that cheat sheet right from the Schmetz website if you would like to have something with a little bit of something just to sort of have next to your stuff. We also have a variety of other needles. We sell these are Class A needles. They have drastically changed over the last few years. I would say maybe 6 years ago, I wouldn't have put a Class A needle in my machine.
That's almost all I use these days.
Yeah.
Though I'm going to be trying these.
Yeah, and I'm excited
recently
to try these. We were given some needles from Dime to try. They have a new needle that is ceramic coated, and Dime makes an embroidery needle that is sharp. Where's the camera? And they make embroidery needles that are like a slight ballpoint, and they have 8012s and 7511s. So they have some different styles of them, but this ceramic coating on them is supposed to help prevent it's supposed to last longer, and they are supposed to have less coating on not supposed to be any coating on them, but you get 20 needles in a pack of these. So
do you remember how much they were?
They were like
just over
$10 or something.
They're very reasonable.
Priced. Yeah, way more reasonable than anything else that we have. So we aren't carrying these yet.
They just sent us these for testing. So Sarah and I are going to test them, and we'll see what we think.
Yeah.
And we'll let you know.
And if we like them, then we will definitely carry these in the store, because they are a nice it's a nice
nice price point.
Nice price point, yeah.
And if it's 50-cent needle, you don't feel as guilty about, I'm good. Let's just get a new one the next time.
Absolutely.
So every little bit helps. What needle is best with King Star? I am generally using my embroidery needle because I'm mostly embroidering with that King Star. That's the wonderful thing about King Star, is that you don't have to change.
Yeah, this thread is round. Most metallic threads are not round.
No.
But this is wound, so we just use, and I don't even go up. I just use the same
7511. I don't change my speed. I don't change a darn thing. This is just like regular thread. So just rock and roll, just like everything else. Just change your thread color and go. So
no, they do have their Designs and Machine Embroidery Dime. They are definitely an embroidery machine company. But no, they do have other needles that are not embroidery. These are all designed for embroidery, and we don't have an opinion on them yet. We haven't actually had an opportunity to try them yet. So I have never sewn with any of them.
I haven't either, but we're, like I said, they just sent us these for samples. So we're going to give them a shot, see what we think and how they stitch out. The last time I stitched out something with the coating, I wasn't super happy with the coating.
Right.
So we'll see how it goes.
Yeah.
And
we do use, there's a lot of Kimberbell projects that use that sticky stabilizer.
Yes, which we're hoping that that's going to be
good for
good for ceramic that won't stick to
Yep.
all of that. So thanks for hanging out with us. We ran a little bit over. And Shannon, we carry all that Kingstar thread. We can help you out with those colors.
That's right.
So you can just have some fun there.
Lavender is being discontinued.
Lavender is being discontinued. So if you would like that one, they're coming out with a new purple shortly. Yep. So they are discontinuing their lavender, which is MA9.
So what we have is what we have.
So yeah, if you are looking for all the colors, you might want to pick that one up while you still can. Yep. So all right. Thank you for hanging out with us. We will see you guys next time, and happy stitching in the meantime. Have a good one. Bye, guys.